I have learned a little bit about myself as I've traveled this life. But one of the important lessons I've learned is that if I don't set something, even something important, as a priority, and carve out a specific time for it, I will get distracted and will not make time for it in my life. Perhaps that resonates with some of you. Back when I was new to ministry, I was serving People's Church Unitarian Universalist in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I felt something was stirring in my heart or in my soul. I wasn't clear what it was, and I was prepared to ignore it, to ignore the restlessness, and just keep doing what I was doing, push on through, do what I was doing. That would have been easy. But also I was aware that stirrings, if ignored, might leak out sideways in some kind of reactive, perhaps even destructive way. I know that left to my own druthers, I would just keep doing my same routine thing, get distracted and never deal with any of this. So I had to set some time aside. It's the only way it was going to happen. So I signed up for a spiritual direction group. Now, it was with other clergy, and it was going to be held at a local retreat center by a nun who was one of their facilitators. Being in a group would hold me accountable for my own personal growth, to understand what was going on within me, to give me focus so I wouldn't get distracted. But perhaps, I hate to say this, most important, since I paid for it, I'd make myself go every week. Now, I had never been in a spiritual direction group. But I'd heard about them. Being a minister, you hear about things. My understanding was that during a group, what we would do is, someone would come in and they'd share something was going on, maybe a problem, something we're struggling with. And then the group members would, they'd offer some thoughts or some questions to assist that person in looking a little deeper within themselves. The members of the group weren't supposed to ask advice, but were supposed to listen for what touched them about what the person was saying, and offer an observation, a question that might deepen that person who shared's reflection. Now let me share some questions I read about before going into this, because I thought, what am I getting myself into? So those questions like, I wonder if you have ever felt this way before. Okay. I noticed that you almost came to tears while you were talking about, whatever it was I was talking about, making an observation about, maybe something, there was some emotional connection there. I found this last question interesting, or not next to the last question interesting. Why does this problem feel too big for a solution for you today? I was thinking about that, and it did feel like it was too big for me today. And then here's one more question. Do you feel that this situation in your life needs light, but that darkness is mysteriously beckoning you on? After I read that question, I thought, wow, whatever's going on inside of me probably does have some sort of solution, And yes, I did want insight, light, if you will, but I was finding myself being beckoned by darkness. Inside, somewhere, in that dark, unknown place, perhaps my center. I wasn't clear how to find that space in the darkness, that place inside of me that was stirring by myself. I didn't even know for sure what the questions I should be asking myself were. So I wonder, how often have you taken a significant amount of time to listen to the voice within you? Or to give voice to your stories, your life stories, to someone else? Or have you paid attention to the great whatever's messing with you? You know? Attending to what your God or whatever is out there is asking you to explore, to help you feel more whole. Have you carved out time to reflect on the larger meaning of your personal experiences or the purpose of your life? How often have you given yourself the gift of time to sit alone or with a group of people with different beliefs who are willing to support you as you look within? I ask you these questions because these are questions that I ask a lot of people in church, like you guys. And when I've asked a lot of people, Unitarian Universalists and otherwise, time and again, when they think of me as a clergy that they can share something with, what they tell me is that they have a yearning to look within, to understand themselves better, to understand what's stirring around inside them emotionally or spiritually in a safe, accepting, supportive place. Do you have a yearning to look within, to understand yourself better, to feel more whole, to find your center? When I entered the retreat center, which I'd been in many times, I noticed that there were just a couple of people and they were in the back of the main hall. There was a little door beside them. I don't think I'd ever been in. So I went over and said, are you all here for the spiritual direction group? And one elderly man said yes and introduced himself. He was a chaplain at a local hospital. And the other person was a middle-aged woman who was the pastor of a local Episcopal church. They had been part of this group for some time, and so they were going to, clue me in on some of the rules, how things worked. So they said, you're entering sacred space. So we ask that you take off your shoes before you come into the group. They told me that we were going to be asked to sit in silence quite a bit. But to set that up, they want us to enter the group, to enter this room in silence until we are asked to speak. And so I looked into the room. I just wanted to have a sense of what it was like. And as I looked into this little room, it basically was just big enough for about 6 or 8 chairs. They had floor-to-ceiling windows, big comfy chairs. They had blankets in them, so I was like, it's like a back to the womb kind of a thing going on. And then there was a little table in the middle with a candle, and that was it. There's nothing else in that room. And it looked like, to me, kind of a sacred space. You know, I could really get into it. So I have to admit that I was a little afraid, to enter the first time. I didn't know what I was getting into. So I took my shoes off maybe a little slower than I probably should have. As I was doing that, a small, really elderly woman came up, and she introduced herself. She was the nun who would be leading our group. I watched her quickly take off her shoes and entered. So I best go, So followed her in. So the group started, and all she did, it was completely silent. All the people in there were silent. She lit the candle in the middle on the table. And then she did what she later called a centering prayer. Now, this is a form of meditation used by Christians which places a strong emphasis on the intention to be open to the presence and action of the divine or the spirit or the holy or your deepest self or your center. And what happens there is she offers a word or a couple of words or maybe a simple one-line prayer and then silence. And so, I was sitting there and I was thinking about this, and it reminded me of Zen meditation. I don't know if you've ever practiced Zazen meditation. You're sitting in silence and letting whatever kind of stirs within your mind, heart, spirit, pass freely through you without expectation. And during that time, you might be offered some wisdom or enlightenment or connection. And so I'd had that experience, so I guess I was prepared to some extent. And the word she offered was grace. She just said grace, and then there was silence. Well, grace is sort of a mixed bag for me. Growing up Catholic, it had always meant the spontaneous, unmerited gift of the divine for the salvation of sinners. And that was the first thing to pop into my head. I had to realize that what was there no longer had any meaning or significance for me. And I just allowed it to pass through me, and I softened into the word, and a meaning came up that has held for me for some time and may continue throughout my life. The word grace that came into my mind, heart, spirit at that moment was unearned love, freely given to oneself and freely given to and accepted from others. So love given to myself. In other words, by our very existence, myself and everybody else, we are all worthy of love. Self-love and love from others, and everyone else is deserving of love. And as part of that, I feel called to offer love to others just because they exist. Not because they've done anything to deserve it, but just because they exist as a human being on this planet. So that came up within me, and I settled into that. And I felt the warmth that it offered and the calmness and comfort within me growing and peace settling. And the moments of silence passing. I wonder for a moment If during our Lectio Divina that we did during meditation today, if there was a word or a phrase that you've held on to, that may have offered you some warmth or calmness or comfort or peace, or that beckoned you forward into something new, perhaps some new awareness, new insight, something that may carry with you in your heart, soul. As part of this contemplative practice is to make time for things that touch you deep inside, that might help move you forward to become and embody the person that you're meant to be. After the silence, the nun gave us further direction. She said that each week, one or two of us would be given time to share a pickle or a stirring within the group. I don't remember she actually used the word pickle, but that seems to keep popping up in my head. Something that, you don't have an answer for. It's a pickle. And she said, we want you to share that, and after the sharing, there would be silence. And then the group would offer questions, observations. Then there would be silence. Then you could talk for a few moments, after you shared. And then there would be silence. And then the group would close. And there'd be silence. So, to me, that seemed like an awful lot of silence, just to be frank. But I guess finding my center and gaining some wisdom or insight would be worth it. And so I decided just go with it, go with the process. So as the case in most of my life, what I tend to do when people ask for volunteers, I don't know about you, I just say, yes, pick me first, that has always worked well, except for maybe when I had to climb on top of a telephone pole and jump off, but that's another story. And so I had no idea. I'd never done this before, and so I just decided I'd just say what was on my heart. I said, there's something going on inside me I can't ignore. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know how to articulate it to you guys, or if it makes any sense. I said, I'm pretty sure it has something to do with my ministry and how I should live my ministry in the world. I felt like I had accomplished a monumental task in helping a congregation move from one church home to another. I made some significant difference in the social action and social justice in the community. But I also felt, unease, drifting off center, and I wasn't sure why. I said, that's all I know. That's it. Y'all have to figure out the rest, or maybe I have to figure out the rest. And so we headed into silence. I had no idea what they were going to ask, or if what they were going to ask was going to be helpful to me or not. I will tell you that what they did ask, what they did offer, was helpful. I'm not going to share with you all the details of all that, but it affirmed for me that contemplative prayer or practice or meditation or spiritual direction is important in my life, both as a way to reach an inner balance in here and a balance between this and how I am in the world. In the ancient heretical Christian writing of the Gospel of Thomas, it is written, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This quote has been, since then, a touchstone. And so I've continued a contemplative spiritual practice. For a long time, I continued in spiritual direction, and now I do more contemplative practices myself, and I may get into some spiritual direction again in the future. I know if I don't stop and make time to figure out what's going on inside me, I won't be balanced. I will be out of touch with my center. And if I'm out of touch with my center and I'm out of balance with me, or out of balance between me and the outside world, there'll probably be negative consequences. But I try not to think, if you don't do this, there are going to be negative consequences, because that's kind of like the whole stick approach, hitting me with a stick, trying to say, if you don't do this, bad things will happen. Instead of thinking about the stress or discomfort or reactiveness that I might experience, I try to think about the joy and the peace, the comfort, the calmness, the insight and awareness that I gain as I become more centered. I invite you to think about this, not just for you personally, because I think that's really important, but also as a community. This congregation also has defined its center. After COVID and community changes and new people, I'm here as your developmental minister to help you to discern who you are as a congregation now, what your mission and vision is, how you covenant with one another to be in relationship with one another. I'm also here to help you discern who you want in this role as a minister. And for that discernment process to be fruitful, each of you must ask questions of yourself and of each other. And not just react to those questions, but let the answers bubble up from within you. Give each other mental and emotional space to live into the truths that you will discern. And at times that may not be an easy process, because it's easy just to go along and do what you've always done and in your life and in this community. But I guarantee you, if you find your center, gain a little insight, personally and communally, it will be worth it. I thought the best way to end this sermon was not to say, go do this, but was to offer you one more centering meditation. And so, again, I ask you to sit comfortably, take a deep breath. Put your hands in your lap. And bring your attention down to your hands. I know that may sound a little strange, something maybe you don't do very often, but I invite you, just go down to your hands and pay attention to the sensation of your hands. All right, now they might feel a little chilly. Notice how they feel on top and on bottom, Maybe us guys have a little hair on the back of our hands, or they might be smooth. And I want you to open your eyes and look at your hands, front and back, and just, maybe you haven't looked at them in some time. I mean, really look at your hands. What do you see? What do you experience as you give attention to your hands? You might hold them away from you for a moment and just see how they appear a little distant from you. You might close them tightly and see how that feels, and open and notice how they change and how they look. You might put your fingers intertwined and notice what you experience. And as you look at your hands, think about what your hands have done. What they've done for you. How you've used them to make the world a better place for yourself, for those you love, for those who've come into your life, even if they've just come in for a little while. Be thankful for your hands. Bless your hands. And how might you do that? Is it that you say something, or you think something, or you hold your hands in reverence in some way? I invite you to cup your hands for a moment, like you would if you're putting your hands under a faucet to get some water. But not water. Imagine that what your hands hold is your truth, your understanding of yourself and others, right there in your hands. Imagine it holds the grace, the unmerited love for yourself and others. Imagine there is still more space in your cupped hands, more space for more truth and more understanding. And know that it's not just your hands, but the hands of everyone in this community that are open to more truth and more understanding, whose hands are available for more service and more love. That we are all open and ready for what new truth, new love, new joy comes into us here with these people in the world. My friends, what is in your hands blesses you, blesses us, and lets us bless the world. Amen. My friends, finding your center takes time. I invite you to carve out time in your busy lives for some contemplative practice, setting your center as a priority in your life. And notice the blessings it offers. This is your individually and collectively sacred journey. Your sacred journey. Discover, learn,